Hey everyone, I just want to show you a quick view of how I would set up your Fauvist project before you go and add any crazy texture or details. So this project is gonna be very similar to what we did with our coloring page, in the sense that it's going to be using closed forms, and you're going to color those sections. One specific tool that I want you all to focus on is if you go in this little section that has a little highlighted box area and a arrow, you click and there's a tool called the lasso tool. The interesting thing about this tool is, just like in our last project, you can go and find generalized forms and highlight them. Pretty much, highlight the outline like you would do with a brush, except it makes this little section that's highlighted, and you pretty much can only manipulate this section. So to show you what I mean by that, I'm going to use the paint bucket and fill this entire section. So it's real quick. One thing that you can do that's really neat, though, is you can go further and, let's say, add another color, and you can add texture or other stuff to that form that you're focusing on. But you can also start outside and add little texture marks like these cross hatchings, and I'm pressing and pretty much pulling, flicking my crosshairs, and as you can see, it only manipulates this area that's highlighted. I'm starting and pressing out here, but it's not adding any lines in this area that I haven't highlighted. So mostly for this project, at least in the beginning, you're going to focus on these closed sections. And every time that you add a color to one form that you find, you're going to add another layer. So we go up to this section right here in our layer box and click the plus button for add another layer. So then this layer is selected. One thing you have to keep in mind is this section is still highlighted. And so let's say you want to add color or, try to manipulate another section. This area is still going to be, you still only be able to manipulate this section that's highlighted. So what you're going to do is, up here, there's a similar box that shows that little highlighted section, but it also has a red X and it says deselect. So this is our deselect tool, and it undoes the highlight that we just did here. And so what you would do next is you do pretty much what I had showed you before. You find a form that you want to enclose and try to follow the outline of the last form that you did. It's okay if you overlap, like I'm doing right here, a little bit, because if you do that, then it'll be a little bit, it'll be more clean. And so then you have to go in when you add another color and, just pretty much fill in the gaps that it might have left behind. So this is a completely different setup from what you had just seen. And the reason why it is because this is a more complete version of what I would want to show you, and just to save some time. So we're focusing on complementary colors. And the way that I've set this up is, I'm doing one closed form section that I interpret on my subject. And each layer I'm going, and somewhat alternating colors. This red I decided to add later. But in the beginning, what I was mostly focusing on as I was filling out this middle ground section was the use of complementary color. So I was mostly focusing on the orange and the blue. What I was doing is throughout the section, I was adding colors and then adding layers, and I was trying to make it as simple as possible. You can always go back and you can add little changes or change the colors whenever you want. But, in order to make it easier on myself, I was working on this section, filling it all out, seeing if it looked good, and if it didn't, then I'd change it. So I'll just show you real quick, if I can get all of this together, how my view is, where I went to and then where I stopped at. I added, little bits of smoke, and it didn't have to necessarily follow, realistic color scheme, but, at the end, this is what I chose. So I was focusing on this section, and then I later went and, added to the background and then the foreground. And this is what you're going to want to be doing with whatever subject that you're choosing, whether it be a person or a thing. Like you might, for your subject, you might have a picture of let's say your dad, and so let's say you focus on his eyes, and then you go maybe next to his eyebrows and certain sections, just in order to make it easier on yourself, and so you can get a general view of what it looks like, so you can change it before you go even further, and then you're in a whole mess of I had so many layers, so what am I going to change now? So now I'm going to show you a speed run of what I did to set up my composition before I added texture, lines, and movement. This speed run doesn't really show you the amount of times or the things that I did to change the color combinations, but I changed the color combinations a lot. I spent a pretty decent amount of time going back and forth with the foreground, the background, and the middle ground of my subject, to figure out what combinations work. And of course, if you choose a person or a thing, you might focus. Let's say if you're focusing on a person, you might focus on the face and all the features in that, and then maybe go to the body and so on. So here's a quick look of that.